All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you would, we're going to go ahead and bring up our next speaker. Our next speaker is a famed attorney, a famed Texas attorney. His name is Mark Mueller. Now, he's asked me to allow him to give his own introduction, so I'm going to go ahead and let him do that. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to attorney Mark Mueller.
Whoops. Okay, can you hear that? Kind of leaning over here, but yeah, well, try raising it up without breaking it. I might not need an introduction, but I need technical help.
Let's see, maybe it's not going to go anymore.
That's why.
Okay.
See, I was right. See, I'm right once in a while. Okay. All right. So let me tell you a bit about how I got involved in the JFK/MLK whole field of things. It was convoluted. I was asked to represent the family of a guy formerly from Memphis named Ronnie Atkins. Okay, Ronnie Atkins' father was a guy named Russell Atkins. They were from Memphis. Now, these names may or may not be familiar to you, but the Ronnie Atkins story of complicity in the MLK assassination by his family made its way into the hands of William Pepper. And Ron gave a deposition of sorts at the time to William Pepper back in 2008 or 9, something like that. And then that was picked up by William Pepper, and then Phil Nelson later wrote a book on a similar topic and picked up on that material. All right, help me with that. Yep. So how I got involved was Ronnie Atkins, also known as Ronnie Tyler, had been in the witness protection program because of death threats on him for involvement in a number of things, but he testified against a bunch of bikers and in drug-related cases and things like that. So he was in the witness protection program. And while he was in the witness protection program, his mother and 2 of his children were shot up. Mother was killed, and the children were badly injured. That happened in Dallas. At the time, he was working, he's in the witness protection program, but he's working for the federal government on a contractor case involving ATF and customs and all kinds of stuff. This is crazy. Witness protection program, the guy was 6'5", went by the nickname Bear. That was his nickname actually in these projects. So anyway, okay, I'm going to drop a couple of odd things in here for you because, this is an unsolved situation. He wanted me to represent him he thought his security had been breached intentionally by the government, and that's what led to the death of his mother. The case was too messy. And so after investigating it for a while, I decided, I can't make this case. But around that time, he started telling me a story about Memphis and MLK, and that his family had been involved in the MLK situation, including that his claim that his father had delivered money from Clyde Tolson to a warden in a Missouri prison to allow James Earl Ray to escape. Okay, and that his father was also a Dixie Mafia, KKK, Mason, all this other kind of stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna hop around a little bit here, but that was the first claim. Now, I haven't been able to verify that claim. Okay, but another interesting sidelight here is that Ronnie later told me that he had had a meeting, his mother had had a meeting with Clint Peoples. People know who that is? Clint Peoples, right? Had a meeting in Dallas with Clint Peoples involving some sort of what she thought could negotiate some kind of protection for the family in exchange for information about JFK. involving, I think, Mac Wallace and some other stuff. Now, this is a crazy claim, okay? And I haven't been able to, the family says it happened. A couple of people, they met in a Dallas area mall in the parking lot and looked at information and stuff like this. But again, I can't prove it happened. But what's curious is that this, within days of this meeting, this alleged meeting, the mother was shot up, and within a week of that, Peoples went off the road and died. And his material was never found. People know, if you know about this, this is one of those gaps, okay? To complicate all these things is that Ronnie's the guy that stole the body of Elvis to try to get Elvis buried in Graceland instead of in the city cemetery. That's verified. But a lot of things are just confusing and unverified. So anyway, so that's how I got into this, is that I got pulled into, we're involved with MLK, and then later my family was also involved in JFK, and there was this big relationship between Clyde Tolson and Russell Atkins. I've got 21 volumes of transcript that I took while he was on his deathbed. And I've been trying to fact check that. So if anyone wants to help with that. We got a lot of material, but I can't verify that it's true. In fact, I've caught him in some lies and I've caught him in many mistakes. And that's part of the difficulty of some of this stuff. But anyway, that's how I got involved in this. I met Judith Baker last year. I gave a little talk at this program about what it would have been like to defend Lee Harvey Oswald. And an interesting, Roy is an investigator that worked for me and also a preacher. Judith said, you need to come to the grave of Lee Harvey Oswald. She said, I guarantee you, really something will happen that's extraordinary when you go see this. I can't tell you what it is, but you should go. And I said, okay. So Roy and I went. And it's making my goosebumps right now. When we pulled into this graveyard, okay, and we were going to lay flowers down. He was going to say a prayer. There was a small group of people. And all of a sudden, the wind picked up. And I swear to God, we could feel the presence of something. Okay, I got goosebumps. I looked over at Roy. I said, Roy, he got goosebumps head to toe. And it stayed there. We could feel the presence of Lee Harvey Oswald's spirit somehow. I don't know how to explain that. And maybe people say I'm crazy, but I had it. He was there. He had it too. And when we were done with the little ceremony, the wind died down and it turned around. Okay, so I'm just saying that is an odd piece of this. Judith worked in my office in Austin for about a year finishing her book. I can't claim any credit for that other than I'd feed her, get her home at night sometimes. But yeah, there's my poem. Anyway, so I agreed to write a poem about my experience with Judith and Lee. And it's an afterword in her book, but here it is. And you don't have to tell me you like it, doesn't matter. This just popped out of my head onto a phone. And it has to do with, as you can get this, the difficulty of fighting the establishment and how they brand you with their version of the truth and just slaughter your personality. And it's very hard to get out of this. Here we go. To Judith and Lee. Government ink, a harsh tattoo, branded like cattle, stained much deeper, skin to bone, labeled and shunned, ridiculed and avoided, scarlet and black flashing neon. What they say you become, hard choices, roads not traveled, broken hearts and a fallen soldier, 2 young daughters, a wife and a lover, all tattooed in government ink. False history, a convenient and unbelievable story of lone nut commie ex-soldiers in all our school books, Life magazine and TV. News reporters, you too. Dan Rather, speaking lies for CIA bosses. The company line was make believe, but you reassured a nation of willing fools. That 6th floor corner window, the gun, the lone assassin, none of it was true. Now we switch to the grave. From a graveyard near Dallas, Lee is the whisper of the wind. Semper Fi, a good Marine till the end. But who and why and what does it matter? The credits and characters scroll down like a movie. Producers, writers, I'm talking about the killings, editors, executive and co-producers, actors, cameos, soundtrack, crew, grips, makeup, disguises, bullets and weapons, security, marketing, funding, accounting, distributions, commissions, blue ribbon panels, congressional blessings. Blame it on the devil. So many faces and too many names. Johnson, Nixon, Bush, Tolson, Dulles, lawyers and cops, Secret Service, real and imposters, mafia, CIA, military gunmen and leaders, Bay of Pigs survivors, hitmen, soldiers of fortune, Cubans, Watergate, burglars, Hoover, McCloy, and so many others. Whew. Right? Who made the profits? Who gained the power? Who sealed the documents and kept killing for silence? Buried for decades, redacted the documents, redacted or just gone. A nation's betrayal, we pretend we can't see. Neutered and pickled, kept in a jar, a nation without balls, heart, or a brain, or even a mirror. Here we are now, America the Great, broken by lies, branded by treason. I'm out of the game. So Judith, it happened. Okay, do you have John? Okay, so I've got my talks about lawyers and the role of criminal defense lawyers in the cover-ups and conspiracy of all 3 killings. And I have a surprise guest for you. It's not on the registry. This is John Currington. You know who John Currington is? John Currington was the personal lawyer for, hey, John?
Sure.
There you go. Can you guys hear this? Speak up, John.
I'm here.
All right. So John Currington was a personal lawyer for H.L. Hunt, okay, for many, many years. And he was basically also an executive assistant, was in the next office to him. And the door was often open. So he is a privy to history. He wrote a book about his experience. He kept it limited to what he knew. We met in East Texas and had a little conversation. And since my topic is about lawyers here, John is a lawyer, but John has a personal, John, let me ask you to tell these people about your experience with H.L. Hunt and Percy Foreman with regard to the James Earl Ray case.
Well, I had been exposed to Percy Foreman before the conversation involving the killing of James Earl Ray. But Mr. Hunt called Mr. Foreman there in Houston and talked briefly about the benefits that it would be to everybody's benefit for James Earl Ray to plead guilty in the assassination of Martin Luther King. And Mr. Hunt asked Percy Foreman if he would meet with me if I sent him to Dallas to go over some of the ideas that we, H.L. Hunt, myself, had discussed in his office. And Percy opened me with open arms. Mr. Hunt gave me a briefcase, had $125,000 cash in it. I took a Breda flight from Dallas to Houston. I was picked up at the Houston airport by an employee of Mr. Foreman's and was carried to his office. After a few brief exchange words, I told him that I had just jotted down about 125,000 reasons why James Earl Ray should plead guilty to the killing of Martin Luther King. And Mr. Foreman said, just leave your briefcase with me and I'll take a look at those reasons a little bit later on. And that was the extent of our conversation.
All right. Thank you, John. And John, can you briefly also mention what you told me about the time that you were also given some money to try to spring Jimmy Hoffa from prison?
Mr. Hunt made a deal, and it wasn't made directly with Jimmy Hoffa, but he had a representative that Mr. Hunt was working through. Mr. Hunt said that he would make his best efforts to get Jimmy Hoffa out of the penitentiary, and he wanted Jimmy Hoffa. His only thing that he wanted from Jimmy Hoffa was to agree that no effort would be made to unionize any of H.L. Hunt's workers in 14 different food processing plants that he had in the United States. And there was a man named Sidney Zachary. He was an attorney, and I think an attorney for the Teamsters Union. I met him twice in Dallas. First time I carried him to Mr. Hunt's office. Second time I met him at the Cabana Hotel there in Dallas, which was owned by the Teamsters Union. I delivered to him $125,000 in cash. He left the next day, flew to Atlanta, Georgia. Next day went to Montgomery, Alabama, went into a restaurant that night. The restaurant caught on fire. I believe there were either 23 or 24 people killed. Sidney Zachary was one of them. From that moment on, I never knew, Mr. Hunt never knew what had happened to the $125,000, if it had been delivered to the person it's supposed to get to, or if the money burned up in the fire. I don't know, and I don't speculate on it. But anyway, that shut all the motions down on getting Jimmy Hoffa out of the penitentiary, and he remained there a few more months before he got a release from an official there. And shortly after that, Jimmy Hoffa disappeared, and as far as I know, has never been located.
Okay. Hey, John, let me ask you one more question here. And this is about the timing of the JFK and Lee Harvey Oswald situation. You personally were asked to go down and take a look at the security around the jail. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, I believe that Kennedy was assassinated on a Friday. On a Saturday afternoon, Mr. Hunt asked me to go downtown and personally go downtown and check what security, if any, was surrounding Lee Harvey Oswald. What did you have to get into the police station? What did you have to get out? And he said, regardless of what time it was, to come by his house and give him a report. And I left about 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, went down, just so happened, got on the elevator with Lee Harvey Oswald and the police captain there, Will Fritz, I believe was his name. And I called Mr. Hunt. I didn't call him. I went by his house about 1 o'clock on a Sunday morning and told him, as far as I could tell, there was no security whatsoever, although there were quite a few people in the police jailhouse. But most of them were newspaper people, and I didn't see anybody that appeared to be a little bit unusual, abnormal. And I gave Mr. Hunt that report. Then he asked me if I would go to Joe Savello's house. And I'd already anticipated what was fixing to happen, and I knew Joe Savello pretty well, and I told him I might be waking him up pretty early Sunday morning. He said, fine. And I got to Savello's house, I'd say 1:30 on a Sunday morning, and told him Mr. Hunt would like to see him as early as possible that morning. Savello said he'd be there before daylight. And I don't know what time daylight was at that time. But anyway, Savello goes to Mr. Hunt's house. I'm at home at that time. I take a bath, shave, put on fresh clothes. I go to the First Baptist Church there in Dallas, of which I was a member. Somebody came in and handed the preacher a note, and he stopped a minute, read the note. He said he just got word that Lee Harvey Oswald had been shot. And I sort of had a pit in my stomach at that time, but I had anticipated that might occur. But anyway, I left the First Baptist Church early and went back to my house.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, John. Thank you. John is in his 90s and still running cattle in East Texas. And he agreed to get off the back of a horse to take this phone call. So if we could give him a nice applause. You get back on the horse and I'll see you soon, okay? All right, bye. How was that for a surprise? Well, we'll talk about Sabello in a second. Okay, so, but my talk, and I'll get to this, Drew, thanks for the reminder. My talk here is about the role of the lawyers involved in some cases, okay? And to show you that the government in these cases leaves nothing to chance. They leave nothing to chance. They don't want to have trials, especially an uncontrolled trial where there's real cross-examination, real subpoenaing of witnesses, and real jurors. They don't want to have that. So as you can see, starting with the first JFK one, right? That Lee Harvey Oswald, obviously, they couldn't have him go to trial. You know, aside from him being innocent, he knew too much. So they had to silence him, okay? And so the next phase of this, if you follow through, he's killed by Jack Ruby. This is ugly. Something got out of whack here to have it happen like this, right? Because this is sloppy, okay? And there were some elements of what happened with JFK that were sloppy and required a lot of cleanup. Only the cleanup wasn't all that clean either, but they had the power and they had the juice. So I'll get to Sabello in a second. But okay, so let's get to the lawyers. I'm a lawyer, and one of the reasons I became a lawyer was I like to watch Perry Mason, Petrocelli for the defense. I was fascinated by F. Lee Bailey and Percy Foreman and Melvin Belli and these big names. I wanted to be a big famous lawyer someday, okay? And one of the reasons I came down to Texas was Percy Foreman was there. Racehorse Haynes was there. And I thought this was a place where I could go stake out. I'm in my fantasy of being somebody who probably shouldn't even gotten into law school. I thought I'd go to Texas and be a big time Texas, wear the boots and, you know, and become a lawyer. So I invented myself. Okay. So that was it. So I was fascinated by Percy Foreman was one of the names. Melvin Belli was one of the names that inspired me to go to law school. Okay. Well, it turns out, let's talk about Percy Foreman. Okay, that's who he was Mr. Currington was just talking about, getting the suitcase full of money, $125,000 in 1968, 69, coded words, 125,000 reasons why James Earl Ray needs to plead guilty. All right. Percy Foreman got involved in the MLK case after there was a first round of lawyers. Okay, there was a first round of lawyers in the case. Now, of course, think about this. I want you to look at the lawyers and who pays for the lawyers. Okay, how do they get there and who pays for them? Because this is not free doing these big cases. Okay, so maybe they're doing it for publicity, but there's got to be some kind of what's in it for this, right? Because you might get your butt kicked in as well. Okay, I can tell you, I wouldn't lightly take on one of these cases. But let's go to Percy Foreman and the James Earl Ray situation. James Earl Ray when he gets caught and he gets a lawyer, very first thing happened was, how are we going to pay for the defense? Now, this is his first set of lawyers. And so what happened was book rights. Okay, remember this? Book rights. The lawyers would get the book right fees as their legal fees. Now, the guy that was doing the book right stuff happened to be more or less of a FBI, plant, basically. He was in that role to spy on the defense counsel table. And so there was going to be no secrets. So there's a back door to the defense right there, okay? I personally think that the very first set of lawyers were going to try to get this case to trial. And that was something that needed to be avoided. I'm talking about the MLK case. That this needed to be avoided. And so Percy Foreman came in. He was a big time criminal defense lawyer, represented a lot of people. I'm going to drop some names in a minute. 6'4", 6'5", 300 pounds, amazing deep voice like this. You know, he won a lot of cases. That's Percy Foreman. Percy Foreman came in to James Earl Ray, probably slightly before this thing happened with that Currington was describing. And he goes, "You need to fire your lawyers, son. They're not doing a good job for you. I'm Percy Foreman. If you can get me, you got the best. People give anything to have me represent them." So he gave him the full court press, okay, to represent. Fire your lawyers, hire me. There's no way they can convict you of this on this terrible, ridiculous, silly evidence. I'm going to tear this up and set you free. Right? Well, that tune changed. And not very long afterwards, and in let's assume John's telling me the truth. I don't think he's lying to me about the money being hands. But anyway, Percy Foreman said to James Earl Ray, "You're going to be convicted. You're going to get the death penalty. Your father is going to be convicted. Your brother's going to be convicted. The FBI's on to you. They're going to take down the whole family. Doesn't matter whether it's true or not. The only way you got out of this is to plead, and that way you can protect your family. And on the side, he didn't put this in the record, was, you know, you can probably be able to withdraw this plea later on, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. There's a loophole someplace. But the only way he was going to not be killed and have his whole family go down was to plead guilty. So he did. And this is a terrible proceeding. Okay. It's ugly. And he pled basically guilty to the charge, and it was an awkward hearing. And then within a day or two or three, James Earl Ray immediately tried to withdraw that plea. Okay. And Percy Foreman didn't help him with that. And he fired Percy Foreman. Yeah. Now that is quite an act for a guy that's there to fire Percy Foreman. Percy Foreman was a very intimidating guy. So Percy Foreman then did just what any good lawyer would do. He rolled over on his client. Okay. Yeah, he testified in Congress and everywhere else that he could that his client confessed and he was guilty. Right. That's Percy Foreman. All right. Now I'm going to show a couple tidbits. So this is Percy Foreman. He forced that plea. Now here's what's also interesting. There was a motion in law circles in a situation like this where you're trying to get a new plea withdrawal. It's called a motion for new trial, essentially, because the guilty plea was considered a trial. Okay, so there was a motion for new trial set aside in the interest of justice. Okay, that's it, because guy did plead guilty. So this is a motion that is in the complete discretion of the trial judge to allow or not allow. Okay. So it was Judge Battle, I think was the name of the judge. The motion for new trial was sitting on his desk when he keeled over from a heart attack within 4 or 5 days of this being filed. Right? You can look this up. I'm not making this up. Okay. This is real. Okay. He died of a heart attack. Okay. Motion was pending. Whether he would have signed it or not, I don't know. Okay. But the law in Tennessee at that time, as I understand it, is that if the judge dies or becomes incapacitated with a dispositive motion that is entirely within the jurisdiction and discretion of the court, that motion's automatically granted in the interest of justice. It should be. You know, think about it, because no other judge can make the ruling. You know, they weren't there. They can't make they weren't there. So this was supposed to be automatically granted, only it wasn't here. Okay. It wasn't. It was not granted. It was denied all the way through. Okay. Now back to I'm going to throw a couple tidbits in. Look at the lawyers. You know, people know there was a sanitation strike in Memphis. My client, Ronnie Atkins' family was involved with the sanitation department. Okay. As well. That sanitation strike was staged. And it was escalated by killing the 2 black guys behind the truck because they were wanting to get Martin Luther King to come down so that they could kill him. Okay. One of the guys that was in the sanitation crew of the Atkins family, and I'm not saying the Atkins family was involved. I can't tell you that. However, I can tell you that in the sanitation, his father was a sanitation department supervisor, and the Big Jim. Big Jim was there, and Big Jim Ryan was his last name. Well, guess who one of the appellate lawyers for James Earl Ray was? Ryan's brother. Okay. Ryan with the sanitation department, his brother somehow became one of James Earl Ray's lawyers later. I mean, it's so set up. This is ridiculous. Think about this. These are the people that staged it. His brother's representing James Earl Ray has no clue. He thinks this is a guy who's trying to help him, but it was another layer of protection in this legal system to make sure that this didn't get out of hand. All right. Now, that's enough I'm going to say about MLK and the lawyer situation. However, you know, in JFK, that Melvin Belli, famous lawyer, represented Jack Ruby in the case. Now, there was a problem that the government had, whoever had, about Jack Ruby, because Jack Ruby, this is a very weird thing to Jack Ruby, and he gets in the jail and he shoots Oswald, and then with this ridiculous story that the strip club gangster guy was overwhelmed with emotion and had to prevent Jackie from a trial. I mean, is there anybody here who thinks that would pass? It's just BS. That's ridiculous, right? So I got a problem. I know this was a loose end. It happened. So what do you do to neutralize Ruby? Okay, Ruby's on tape. He's gonna be found guilty of something. He's got a technical defense at best. So you plead him guilty by reason of insanity, not guilty by reason of insanity. So his credibility is already in play by his own lawyers. And they constructed a defense for his, actions as being based on some kind of brain malfunctions and all this kind of this and that and the other, right? So you're making him, you see what I'm saying? You're automatically, now you've got to, first you had the assumed assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, right? Was he the only one? Well, that assumes he was the one, all right? This is how they go. Well, now you've got Jack Ruby, and he's pleading, they saw him do it, and he's pleading not guilty by reason of insanity, okay? So he's already crippled in his credibility. What was the job of the lawyer in that case? Okay, to plead him that way and keep him off the witness stand is what I think, okay? Keep him off the witness stand, because even if he's pleading not guilty reason of insanity or something like that, if he gets on the witness stand and goes rogue, you see what I'm saying? They had to keep that. Okay, now, how did Melvin Belli, Melvin Belli, by the way, I don't think Melvin Belli was totally on the fix in this case. He hated J. Edgar Hoover for one, hated him. And he was Melvin Belli was a feisty, pretty good lawyer. Percy Foreman was a very skillful lawyer, but a very dishonest lawyer. He was very corrupt, okay? Melvin Belli, though, how did Melvin Belli get involved in this case, and who paid him? Does anybody know? I mean, there's, well, okay. No, actually, Jack Ruby's family first tried to hire Percy Foreman. Yes, Percy Foreman was first on the case before Melvin Belli for a little while. Okay, so it's controversial. We don't know how the actual contact was made, but one of the stories that came out in one of the books was that essentially the call came from Las Vegas to Belli. Belli represented a lot of mobsters and celebrities and all kinds of stuff. And he was a big name, and I don't think anybody's looked at this, okay? But the word was that he was offered $1 million fee and it would be covered, courtesy of Vegas, okay? To represent to represent Ruby. That's all I know about. The trial itself was a rigged zoo, okay? It was terrible. It was just not, but I think Belli did as good as he could under the circumstances to try to get his client not guilty by reason of insanity. Whose phone is that? Not mine, is it? Somebody better wake up. Okay. All right. We got it? Okay. So sorry about that. All right. So anyway, so that's about all I can say about that trial. But you see, the strategy is get a big name lawyer in there and then neutralize the situation best you can. Percy Foreman, I think, was paid off Okay. Now, who told Hunt to pay off Percy? Is something else. Okay. Who did this? Now, I'm going to talk about Percy Foreman again for a second. There's some clients that Percy Foreman had. Okay. People know that Percy Foreman was indicted with the Hunt brothers on a federal wiretapping and witness tampering case? Okay. There were three lawyers and the Hunt brothers indicted for essentially paying off witnesses and wiretapping to make sure that they weren't going to get out of bounds. Okay. This happened in West Texas, and we've got the case thing here. We can look it up. Percy Foreman's case got severed from the other cases. Okay. He was a co-defendant with these several other people. His case gets severed over to Houston. He's indicted for years until his case was dismissed without comment by the U.S. Department of Justice under Jimmy Carter. Whoa. Now, how does that happen? That's a pretty lucky guy. That's a pretty lucky guy. Anyway, let's talk about some clients of Percy's. Charles Harrelson. Okay, he represented Charles Harrelson on at least more than one thing, but one murder trial where I guarantee you the testimony was perjured left and right in this case. But Harrelson killed a Houston lawyer's, David Berg's brother, and it was a contract killing. So I'm just saying, Percy represented Harrelson at one point. Now, whether you think Harrelson's involved in anything or not, I don't know, but name's familiar to you. He represented Joe Savello. Okay, we just mentioned, right? Now, want to guess what he represented Joe Savello on? This is very interesting. Do you remember the Appalachian Mafia gathering in New York? Right? All right. Where some sheriff in upstate New York noticed that there were a lot of big cars pulling into this, this country area, and somebody blew the whistle, and so there were mobsters from all over the country at a big get-together meeting up there in how's it spelled, Roy? Appalachian. Okay, sorry. Anyway, so one of the mobsters that got busted there was Savello, and he was convicted of some kind of a weird conspiracy charge related to that, according to information we have. And Percy Foreman represented him on appeal on that and got him off. Okay, so they're just saying that's one name. Percy Foreman also represented General Walker. Okay, General Walker. And what do you think he represented General Walker on? Okay, General Walker was in trouble because Bobby Kennedy had thrown him in jail. Percy Foreman represented him, got him out. Just saying. These names pop up a few times. Okay, now there you go. Thank you. No, that's absolutely correct. There's a connection here. Okay. Yeah. Well, this is, yeah. Okay. So, well, this is getting into mob history, which is not what I was intending to talk about. However, okay, there's a question mark. Is that Dallas was considered to be the mafia outpost of New Orleans under Carlos Marcellus. Now, some people disagree with that and have it that it's actually flipped around and that they were independent and that Dallas Savello was his own guy. Okay. But anyway, but you're right. So that's the connection she's talking about, is that most people think that Marcello controlled Texas, Louisiana, and in some place there was a line drawn between Santos Traficante in Florida and New Orleans. Okay, but that's what she's talking about. Savello was a name that popped up quite a few times. Let's talk about RFK. This is interesting because now that was the last killing, and we had a history of JFK, which there wasn't a trial of Oswald, and then Ruby's was a dysfunctional trial that was limited with this mental incapacity defense, etc. Anyway, thank you. Okay, so we bumped around and we covered the MLK and the kind of the weird stuff around that. But RFK, okay, Sirhan. Now I got to tell you, this went right by me for years. I was like, yeah, I'm even going crazy terrorist, lone nut, whatever, he had a gun, was shooting, whatever. What's the mystery? Okay. Sirhan was going to get convicted of something probably because he was there and he was shooting something. But what really happened? Okay. And who represented him? All right. So here's what happened around the lawyer situation here. There were essentially the two lead lawyers for Sirhan. One of them was the second lead lawyer was a guy that had represented he was a prosecutor going after the mob in LA for a period of time. And then he got a bullet through the windshield, so to speak, and decided to go flip to the other side and represented the mob. Okay. He was number two. My theory on this is he was there to report what was happening, okay, with the defense, what was going on. Now, I'm not saying mafia, anything. I'm not saying mafia versus CIA or anything. I'm just saying I think this guy was there to report, okay? The lead lawyer was a guy named Grant Cooper. Grant Cooper was a very well-known civil lawyer and to some degree criminal lawyer in Los Angeles, okay? Not as big a name as Belli, but close. He was a president of the American Trial Lawyers groups and things like that. Not as big as Belli, not as big as Foreman, but pretty darn important and one of the more important big lawyers in LA. He's representing Sirhan. He is the lead lawyer. Now, there was a parallel case going on that Cooper was also representing as a defense lawyer on. It was called the Friars Club case. Does anybody know about this? The Friars Club was a celebrity mobster hangout in LA, right? It was a fun place. Gambling, women, good time place. Celebrities, mobsters, et cetera, hung out there. Well, the Friars Club got busted. The Friars Club case involved a gambling charge and a charge of skimming from an illegal gambling game, however you can do that. Okay, now what's interesting here is that one of the defendants in that case, the Friars Club case, which was going on the same time as Sirhan's trial is pending. I mean, these are work up to the trial. They weren't on trial at the same time. But the Friars Club case, one of the defendants in the Friars Club case was a guy named Johnny Roselli. Yeah, okay. Now, all right, so Roselli is in the Friars Club case. Cooper's representing in the Friars Club case. Cooper's also proceeding in the Sirhan case. And then Cooper has a problem that happens to him. He gets caught with a stolen grand jury transcript in the Friars Club case. All right? Whoa. Now, I can tell you as a lawyer, that's not good. And even if you're inclined to play dirty, you better be smarter than that. Okay, but this is not good. Where did he get the stolen grand jury transcript from? Yes, Johnny Roselli, right? How did anybody know that he had the grand jury transcript? Johnny Roselli, probably. Yeah, that's probably the guess. Okay, so now this guy, and you can look this up, but this is not well-known history, okay? Cooper has got his privates in a ringer. Okay. He is squeezed. This is, you lose your law license, maybe pay a lot of money if you want to stay away from prison, but you're going to lose your law license for this one. Okay. High profile case, possession of a stolen grand jury transcript. Okay. But meanwhile, he has this other case over there he's got to be working on. The Sirhan case. Okay. This crazy Arab terrorist guy, right, that was in there. Okay. That case had a problem for the prosecution. Okay, you know what it is? Huh? Yes, that's right. Well, okay, so Sirhan did fire shots. The number of shots, where they landed, whether they were live, that's for other people to talk about. But the coroner report, the autopsy report, said that that bullets that killed RFK came from within an inch to 2 inches behind him. Okay, so there's video of all of this stuff. So it's clear that Sirhan never got in position to be shooting him from an inch or two away from behind. He didn't get any closer than 2 or 3 feet to the closest from the front. Okay, so what you have here is, surprise, surprise, at least 2 shooters, right? Okay, because this couldn't be done, but they have an autopsy that says it happened. This is a big problem for the prosecution. Okay, so the defense of this case is not an easy defense, because you're still going to have prejudice against the defendant. He's going to be probably found guilty no matter what you do. But the true defense is, in my view, is he probably was. It wasn't him that killed Kennedy. It's a technical defense, but he didn't kill him. Okay. Now, to the extent he has some complicity for his actions in the space, he was not in his right mind, probably under some kind of mind control, but that's my speculation. But he wasn't, I would argue he's not in his right mind, not criminally responsible for his actions. But the real defense is he didn't kill him. Okay, that's the defense. Now, how did they wriggle out of this one? Okay, here's what happened. Okay, the lawyers conceded that Sirhan had been the cause of death, but he was crazy. And so let's find him not guilty by reason of insanity. So the autopsy report didn't come into evidence. Okay, now, nice, huh? And guess what happened to those terrible barnacles around his nuts, okay, that were squeezing him? Well, those charges went away. He paid a $1,000 fine for contempt of court or something like that and walked off. There you go. So take a look at the lawyers, okay? A lot of bad things happen under the cover of law and the attorney-client privilege and things like that. And look, I think the attorney-client privilege needs to be protected, okay? But I also think we need to have trials on some of these cases, and you see what happens when you don't have trials, okay? So anyway, that's about all I had. In my time up? Okay, I ran over, didn't I? What? Oh, I should have shut up 20 minutes ago. But anyway, I hope I dropped some information. Yeah, go ahead, Robert. Oh, you don't need. I'm just happy to be here. But isn't this interesting stuff? Right? Like, what's really going on here, right? These things are very controlled situations. There's nothing left to chance. Yep. Oh, yeah. Don't ask me anything I don't know.
Hey, Mark, fabulous presentation. We're all laymen in the legal field. There was a lawyer for Jack Ruby named Joe Tannehill, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you know that Lyndon Johnson's lawyer, Ed Clark, had taken a tax case for Joe Tannehill for tax evasion a year or two before the JFK assassination?
Interesting.
I just want to point that out. That's a fact.
No, I hadn't heard that.
I can give you the information later, but maybe Joe Tannehill was one of the ones corrupting the case for Jack Ruby and rigging it so that he would get convicted.
Interesting.
And so I just want to point that out.
No, thank you.
And I'm done.
Yeah, look at the lawyers, because in my old landlord was the lawyer who got Jack Ruby's case reversed on appeal. Okay. So, people know when Jack Ruby died in prison, he was getting a new trial. Right. I'm just saying that got called out. Okay. I'm done.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Mueller.